Who were the Roman soldiers at the crucifixion of Jesus in around about 30-ish AD? We can't date it precisely. Pontius Pilate's governor, prefect of Judea for 10 years. It's around about that time, but we can't be too precise, during the reign of Tiberius. Now, I've done a much longer video, which I'll link, if I can, at the end of this one, that talks about who were the Roman soldiers in Judea. It's called, Pontius Pilate's real bodyguard, after the nickname of the Royal Scots, the oldest regiment in the British Army. And that looks in more detail about how the different types of province work in the Roman Empire. Now, we cannot be 100% precise, and we cannot say this is the unit that was there in Jerusalem and these soldiers came from that unit and no other unit. However, we can say a few things with confidence enough to say that it's 99.9% chance that this is true, as good as you're likely ever to get in the ancient world. So there are two things to bear in mind. First of all, that Judea is a minor province. It's governed by an equestrian governor. Now, you have the Senate at the top of Roman society. There's 600 or so of them. They govern the big provinces like the Germanies, Britain, Syria is the big province nearby, with at least 4 legions in garrison at this time. Now, Roman legions are composed of citizen soldiers, and they're big units of around about 5,000 men on paper. You have to be a Roman citizen to join. There are a few cases where people are given citizenship when they enlist, but that's pretty rare. So these are Romans by legal status. They're not necessarily ethnically Roman or Italian, although in this early period quite a lot of them still were. But they're also coming from the colonies of veterans established by Caesar, by Augustus, and all these people. Beirut, for instance, is in the news at the moment, was a Roman military colony, so quite a good recruiting area, because often the descendants of veterans decide, oh yeah, I'll go and enlist in the army as well. A legion is commanded by a senatorial legatus, or legate. So he is one of these 600 senators that are the senior council, the most distinguished members of the Roman state. An equestrian is lower than that. He's one step down. He's not a senator. There are tens of thousands of equestrians dotted around the Roman Empire. They're all Roman citizens, obviously you couldn't be an equestrian otherwise, but they are people of considerable wealth, education, status, without being the very top of society. They are not the senatorial class. So when you have a governor like Pontius Pilate, who's an equestrian, he's called a prefect, later on the title will change to procurator, you can't station a legion in his province, in his territory, because the commander of that legion would be of higher social status than the equestrian prefect. So this means that the garrisons of these provinces run by equestrians are what we call auxiliary soldiers. Auxiliaries are non-citizens. They are recruited from people who do not have the legal status of being a Roman citizen, and they're recruited from Syria, from Gaul, from Thrace, from Spain, from Africa, from all over. But they are non-citizens, and they are commanded by an equestrian prefect of a different status who is their commander, and they're organised in units about 1/10 the size of a legion. They're organised in cohorts, or there's the ala for the cavalry. Normally around about 500 men on paper, sometimes up 800 to 1,000 depending on the organisation. There were some double strength units, but they are commanded by an equestrian, so it's okay for a unit like that to serve under an equestrian governor, whereas it's not okay for a legion to serve under an equestrian governor. It creates a problem of status of who actually has authority. So we can say with great confidence that any of the troops in Jerusalem at the time of Jesus' crucifixion were auxiliary soldiers, not legionaries. The only slight possibility to change that is occasionally you have individuals detached from Roman army units and sent around, so it's just possible that some of these men were passing through and were involved, but it's extraordinarily unlikely. Now, go to the other video for more talk about the particular auxiliary units in the province, but the question also asked about the spira, the mention in the Gospels of the troops sent to arrest Jesus. This is a term, it's a Greek, one of the Greek words that it's older, but it's come to be the equivalent of cohort. Interestingly enough, when Polybius first talks about cohorts in 2nd century BC, he actually transliterates cohortis, and uses spira more vaguely and sometimes for maniple. But by this period, by the imperial period, it's come to mean the cohort, which is your sort of battalion-sized organisation, for want of anything else. A lot of these troops are Sebastini, recruited from Sebasti, the area in Samaria. They're Gentiles. There may be some Samaritans among them as well. They are people who, on the whole, do not like Jews and the Jewish population, which explains to some extent the level of vitriol and hostility and brutality they show in the mistreatment of the prisoner they've arrested. You know, the idea this one's the king of the Jews have rejected him. It shows how terrible and perverse the Jews are, and let's, you know, emphasize our contempt and our hatred for all of that. And there are problems of friction, because it's obviously difficult when the governor has an army that relies very heavily on troops from one of the groups within this highly volatile and fractious province where nearly every community is at each other's throats, given the opportunity. So when you say the cohort is sent, the Spira is sent to arrest the prisoner, it's a little bit like saying, and, you know, soldiers of the Grenadier Guards went and did this, or US Marines went and arrested. You're not literally saying the entire battalion goes out and does this job, but an element of it. So you, in the same way you'll say the unit fought at such and such a battle, it might not mean that 100% of its manpower is there. It's just short-term slang. It's like saying, so men of the cohort, basically, have come to perform this duty, because you're not going to send 500 people out on a stealthy arrest mission. It's certainly not all in one group. So these people are auxiliaries. The odds are that they're Sebastini, perhaps Syrians. You know, there's also, you'll later on come across the Augustan cohort based in Caesarea with the centurion, who Cornelius, who's appears to be a local man, has his household there. Even the officers, apart from perhaps the equestrian commanders, are often local gentry, you know, people of status. So when you come to the Crucifixion, you'll sometimes find people saying, oh yes, you know, it's legionaries did this, Roman legionaries did this, or Roman legionaries of the 10th Legion. I've read that. No, that's not the case. There's no evidence for that at all. It is not going to work within the Roman system. The way the provinces are structured means that these are auxiliary soldiers, non-citizens, so there are other reasons for their behaviour, but they are still basically Roman soldiers under the same discipline, acting in the same way, dressed in much the same way, not look like legionaries. The uniform of legionaries and auxiliaries is distinct, but again, on a duty like this, to what extent such men take with them, are wearing armour, helmets, carrying shields, or whether they're in a sort of fatigue uniform, weapons belt on their tunic, you know, armed. They've got obviously the spear that's mentioned as well, but it's always a question of how do we imagine this? To what extent is this a formal thing where you'd go out in full battle rig, or were there other orders of dress, or the equivalent of them, that they might be using at the time? So as I say, what we can clearly say is not legionaries. These are auxiliary soldiers. They're from the cohort, probably the one that's stationed in Jerusalem, although when governors like Pilate come up to Jerusalem for the Passover and other occasions, they tend to bring another unit up from the main base at Caesarea. Again, if the governor comes with a cohort, does that mean the entire cohort, or he's escorted by half of it, a quarter of it, picked men, this century, that century? You know, there's a shorthand. It's like saying the legion went and did this, or the legion was stationed here. It doesn't mean that all the time every single man is in that place. But these are auxiliary soldiers, just like the cohort that's pretty much permanently stationed in Jerusalem. And broadly speaking, because auxiliaries tended to be recruited from the nearest, most convenient local source, at least when the Romans felt they could rely on that source, and volunteers were forthcoming, they are probably men from the wider region, from Syria, from the Roman province, from regions within it, from cities on the coast and elsewhere. But again, you know, the odds are there's the odd waif and stray who's come in from further afield. So auxiliaries, not legionaries, and if ever anyone tries to tell you, you know, it's the 10th Legion there, all this sort of thing, no, it's not. These are Roman auxiliary, non-citizen soldiers. They're the ones who are there in this central moment of the Easter story. So anyway, much more detail on this in the longer video, and if you want to know more, that's the place to go, and it's got some reading suggested as well there. So that's it for this one.